Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the College Information Series. And today we are working on testing. If you're watching at home, wish you could be here. We have fun, but you got to do what you got to do. So let me get started. This particular presentation is going to include a variety of tests. Everyone always expects to talk about the entrance test, the ACT, the SAT, but we're also going to be talking about advanced placement because iLEAD does. It's one of the only independent study charters that actually can give AP testing. And we're going to talk about the PSAT, which is also the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test, which we give here as well. We're also going to talk a little bit about do we test, do we not test, what's going on with all that test optional stuff. And yeah, so let's get to it. So let's start with college testing. The SAT and the ACT, the tests that you hear most about. So basically these college exams, they test what you'd expect, your basic reading and writing skills and your math skills. They once upon a time, back when my son took the test in like 2015, 2014, they had an essay requirement as well. And but that's gone, with the exception of, I guess, a few people who take the tests in for the military and a couple other schools, like in other states. But for the most part, it's just vanished. It's out there, so you don't need to worry about it. Um, the SAT and ACT do not need to be ordered or arranged by us. They're available at local high schools. They're available about 6 or 7 times for each test during the school year. And you just go on to the website, the ACT or the SAT website, and you just sign up for a test. It's that simple. They're offered at local high schools, so you don't have to drive all the way to our learning studio to come and take the test with us. They can include accommodations for students who have disabilities. Once in a while, an accommodated test must be taken with iLEAD down at our studio. You would know if that's you. Um, I think I'm going to talk about disabilities later, but just in case, let me talk a bit about that now. If you have a 504 or IEP, it's not automatic. So if you have accommodations for testing with your school, you will need to have one of us request accommodations from the College Board itself. So it's not automatic. If that is an issue with you, just get in touch with me or talk to your EF about getting in touch with me, and we can work on those accommodation requests together. We also can provide a fee waiver. We cannot provide a total fee waiver when we do the in-school test before your local test. If you qualify for free or reduced lunch, you just let us know. We have fee waivers specifically for SAT. We have them handy. I think I've got some ACT fee waivers as well. So if it is a situation where it is just too expensive for you, just let us know and we can do that fee waiver. I think you get 2 free tests with the fee waiver. Okay. So the real question everyone seems to have is, do we take the test? Do we not take the test? And this especially happened after COVID. Around the COVID time, everyone dropped the tests. And suddenly, there was a feeling where everyone had to take it, to suddenly nobody had to take it. And now some people have to take, and it's very confusing. So this switch has been changing regularly, but let's dive into it a little bit deeper. So the first thing that's important for our learners to know is that the University of California, UCs, and the California State University, CSUs, are test free. I use the word test free. Some people say test blind. I think test free is a little bit classier than test blind, but they don't take the test. And so even if you have a perfect score, the UCs and CSUs aren't going to see those tests. There's no advantage or disadvantage to testing. And there's about 75 colleges in the United States that are test free where they refuse to look at a test. Has to do with equity and access to colleges, evening that playing field. There's a website called Fair Test. It's just fairtest.org, and you can learn more about which colleges are which, and they have a lot of information about testing. Now, the majority of colleges in the United States right now, with some notable exceptions, but the majority are test optional. And you can choose to send a score if you want. And choosing to send a score is now a strategy instead of something that is just expected. There are over 2,000 colleges that are test optional, and we'll talk about that strategy as we go through the rest of this presentation. So, one of the things that's really important to know is that when you are sending in that test score, this college is not looking at your test score, sort of comparing it across the board with the people at this high school and the people at that high school. As with everything else, colleges are looking at test scores in the context of your school as well as that typical score range. So, yeah, if you've got a college that typically has very high scores and you have a very low score, that's not something you want to do. But if you are sort of in that range, you're close. It may have more to do with the comparison to the rest of the high school. And that's really important with iLEAD. Typically, if a student is attending a school that is a traditional school that has a high level of rigor, most people go to college, you would want to be in a 50th percentile of the test scores or above in order to be competitive, but not necessarily with all high schools because not all high schools treat testing differently and not all high schools have the same level of rigor. And so you need to look at the strategy and you need to look at it within the context of iLEAD. So one of the things that we do is to make sure that iLEAD is looked at fairly. We have this statement. I actually wrote this statement, and it is in the school profile, the document that gets sent with the students' transcripts to help the admission reader better understand our school. And this is a statement that's there, and I'm going to just read it even though it's on the screen. iLEAD Hybrid believes strongly that test scores are not an indicator of future college success. Since the University of California and the California State University systems are test-free, we have a reduced focus on standardized testing, and many of our learners choose not to take the SAT or ACT. This is 100% accurate. And so my goal in writing that statement that goes to the different colleges is to make sure that our students are not penalized because we do have that reduced focus on testing here. We want you to take your state test. Let me just say that. We need that. But when it comes to admission tests, I and the rest of the high school team believe that we need to reduce some of that stress. This goes with you to your colleges. Now, let me click ahead. We've got a set of schools that are now required their testing. So in COVID, everyone dropped their tests, but then they slowly started to trickle back in. Um, they tend to be your fancy brand, fancy pants school names. Your Ivy Leagues are all coming back with the exception of one or two. Stanford came back. That's the only college in California that actually requires a test. And so from year to year, it's going to change and more will be added. I think it makes it easier to weed out with some of these schools that get 40, 50, 60,000 applications. And so you need to check individual colleges to see what the policy is. So when a test is required, you must submit that score regardless of what that score is. There's just no choices. And maybe that test score, looking at the test score, will help you decide whether that's the right college to apply to. Now, many will allow a super score. A super score is when you have different test sections. Remember in the beginning, I mentioned that there was reading and writing, like for the SAT, reading and writing is one section together, and math is another section. So some students will take the test multiple times, and if the college super scores, and most do, they will only see the highest score from each subtest. So some students might focus on math and really study up for that math. And then the next time they really focus on English to try to see if they can pull both those scores up to get a super score. Um, once in a while, you'll get a college that requires every test you've ever taken. And I think it's a handful, like one hand, like less than five. So you do have to look on the website of each college. The College Board and the ACT do give you the option to make your own choices. They don't tell a college that a score has or has not been sent. They can't do that. You decide on what scores to send, and it is completely within your power. We got the highly rejectives. We got your Harvards, your Stanfords, your Browns, etc. But there's some interesting other choices. There's a number of states that have re-implemented testing for their state schools. You can see we got Florida, UT Austin came back last year, University of Georgia. Georgia actually came back completely, and then they They pulled back a little bit when they were realizing they weren't getting the students that they needed. I don't know why Eastern New Mexico University, ENMU, put it back. Maybe they'll take it away. ENMU. My sister went there, but that's kind of weird. But you should check each college's admissions because it's just kind of we never know. We never know. And from the time I do this video and it goes up on YouTube to the time that you are applying, it may be completely different. So you do need to keep on top of that. Okay, so then the question becomes, should I test? To test or not to test? That is the question. Well, the first question you need to ask yourself is, are you applying to a college that requires it? I mean, if you're applying to Florida, Georgia, Tennessee's, Yale, MIT, and the rest, the answer is just simply yes. There's no choice. You must test. I don't know if you remember Malala, the girl that wrote the book, and she became really famous. And there was a time when she was applying to Stanford. This was quite a few years ago, and she didn't have an SAT, and they just said, "Sorry, we don't care that you're famous and that we would really want you here, but we are test required. You don't have a test." And I think she went to an Ivy League instead. Or no, she went to Oxford instead. She was like, "I'm not doing that." So the next question you should ask after is it required is, am I a strong test taker? Am I applying to a college where most students are going to submit tests? Will I be an outlier if I don't? This next one's an important one. Does merit aid require testing or is it improved by a test score? And one last thing is, do you need school-based accommodations? Don't know why it's on this page, but I just want to tell you we only provide them in March and October. So if you're going to test with accommodations, that's the time to do it. Kind of weird with the should I test or not test page. I think I should change that. But anyway, these are questions to ask yourself. And we're going to dive a little bit more into that strategy of whether it makes sense. I usually ask a student, are you a strong test taker? And I can actually see their test scores in our student system. And so while students are making that decision, I'm looking over and I'm seeing that their map tests and their CAS tests are high. And yeah, you're a strong test taker. Just take it. You don't have to send it unless it's to one of those required schools. If you have test anxiety or it causes real discomfort, come and take it with us. We're mellow. I think we have like maximum 15 people in a room if you take it during one of the iLEAD test days. It's a lot calmer if you're someone that has anxiety. It's usually me that gives the test. We try to make it fun. Okay. Now, here's the other question, which do I take? And the college doesn't care. The college treats them equally. So there's no strategy in terms of picking one or the other in terms of the college view, but there is a strategy for you because different students react differently to the ACT and the SAT. So if you've taken the PSAT or you've taken an SAT, you can take, get experience there. Right now, the ACT uses both paper and digital, so some people do a little bit better with paper. I think that's going to completely switch over time. Take a practice test for each. So with the PSAT, it's digital, it's automatic. With the ACT, take that practice test how you would normally take it. Because things are moving more and more digital, you might want to take the practice SAT digitally and then get both those scores. Now the scores are really different. One of them is on a scale of like 1 to 36 and one of them is on a scale of 200 to 1600. So it's not comparing apples to apples. And so there's a table that allows you to take one test score and see its equivalent test score and you can try to figure out which one you are better at. So you take the one that works the best. Some people will say, oh, you should go take them all. No, take a practice test, take the PSAT or a practice test, compare the scores, then study for the test that works for you. They're very different from each other. When you take the test, take it in exact testing conditions. Wake up, sit down at 8 o'clock. Make sure you're following the timed requirements specifically so that your score is accurate. That way you can really see what your true score may be. Also use those practice tests from the legitimate websites. Don't grab a practice test from a random place. Use an ACT practice test from the ACT. Use a PSAT practice test or an SAT practice test from the College Board. Okay, so when to test. So It depends on now your practice tests. So hopefully you have practiced. You've taken the PSAT, you have taken or a practice test. Let's say you didn't want to come all the way down to the learning studio because you're way off someplace else. Take a practice test. It's getting the same thing. And then we decide on the best process depending upon how you do on the test. So there's some scores up here. If you don't have a test in front of you, they're kind of they don't make a lot of sense, but this is going to go up on YouTube. So if you want to refer back after you have a practice test in hand, there are different testing schedules. So I really like the company Compass Prep. They do a lot of ACT and PSAT and SAT test prep. And so this I pulled from their manual. It's a great, you can see I have the link down here. And this is their recommendation based on working with thousands and thousands of students. If you're in one of the lower areas of scoring, you're going to go, or sorry, the medium areas of scoring. This is not the lower area. This is the normal area of scoring. This is where most students score, 50th percentile-ish. You're going to prep in the late summer or fall of 11th grade. You're going to test early spring of 11th grade. That's March. That's also when we give the test here at iLEAD. So prep in the late summer or fall of 11th grade. You're going to test in spring of 11th grade for the first time. Then you can take your second test in the fall of 12th. That gives you that full summer to study based on the results of spring. So iLEAD, we give the test in March. Every year we're going to give a school-based SAT, or you can take a local SAT, and you can use that as your first test. Gives you plenty of time to look at the results, figure out what you need to work on, and then do one more test. You almost always do better the second time. So this is the medium range, the typical range, 900 to 1200, 17 to 25. Okay. Now, in the lower range, and a lot of times we'll see these scores if the student is not, necessarily at the same level of as math as was the typical process, a little bit of difficulty in the reading and writing section. So below a 1900, below a 17, you want to defer that testing schedule so that you have time to catch up with your classes. So your first test will be in the late spring of 11th grade. That's May or June of 11th grade. So give yourself more time to do math and to do English in a school setting before you take that first test. So it's no use doing it when your math is not quite at the level yet. And that's okay because you have time. So you're going to take that test around May, around June, and then you're going to take the next test in the fall of 12th, giving you that summer in between. So you'll have a better idea of where you are closer to the end of 11th grade than earlier in the early spring of 11th grade. So that first group that we looked at, we're looking at about a March test. This second group with a little bit of a lower test score on the practice tests, we're looking at a later spring. But everyone's getting it done by the end of 11th grade for that first test. Now, sometimes we have students that just are great test takers, or we got a lot of students that just zoomed ahead in their math classes. So this is the early test schedule. If your PSAT, practice SAT, or ACT are above 1200 or 25, you're going to do the early testing schedule. You're going to prep during the summer, and your first test could be around November, December of 11th grade. We also give the PSAT at that time. You can take them both. You could take a local test, and then you can jump in and take a PSAT with us at our learning studio. And then you're going to take that second test in the spring of 11th grade. So you're knocking it out in 11th grade, and it also gives you one more chance just in case you want to eke that score up in fall. But if you're already at a high level, especially in your math, you can knock that out early. So it really depends on these practice tests. And yes, we offer the SAT in March. Yay. That was new last year, so we were very excited when it happens. So I want to now dive in a little bit to this idea of whether a school is test optional, or I don't know if you can see me in the chat box, but I've got quote marks going on, test optional, meaning they say they're test optional and they actually believe the philosophy, or they say they're test optional and they're kind of not, and you should probably give them a test no matter what. I'm going to open up my chat because I want you to take a look at the chart that I have on the screen. And I want you to notice the University of Chicago. And if we are looking at the University of Chicago and we look at their percentage of students who submitted tests that were accepted and attending. So these numbers are pulled from the common data set. These are students that are actually at the University of Chicago. These are the most recent statistics. So if I were to look at this, I think I have 76. I think that's a 76. University of Chicago, 69, yeah. About 76% of their students submitted a test. 76%. And they've been test optional for a long time. So in your opinion, and you could put this in the chat. We're going to do this in the chat. Are they test optional or does the test optional have quotes around it? Do you really think they're test optional? Should you give them a test? If just what do you think? Test optional or air quotes test optional? Put it in the chat. Let's see if you have a guess. Be brave. There's only 8 of you in here. 7 of you. Test optional or air quotes? So we have technically not really. We have you should give it. We have air quotes. Yeah. You should submit a test and you should study for that test with the University of Chicago. There are cases where if they have a student who is really attractive to them, they've done a lot of stuff. This is one where they might have accepted um, Malala without a test score. But for the typical student, I would definitely give them a test, even though they say they're test optional. Let's look at University of Oregon. We can see it's 13% total. I'm adding your SAT, ACT. Once in a while, a student will send in both, but for the most part, this is kind of your total. Test optional or test optional in air quotes. Do you need to send a test to the University of Oregon? That's just a yes or no. Should you send a test to the University of Oregon? Yeah, you don't need to. You could if you want to. I mean, you could see if it knocks you up to scholarship level. You don't really need it though. I mean, like with 13% of people giving a test, I don't think they really care one way or the other. NYU, what are your thoughts? 38% have submitted a test score. Do you believe you absolutely positively should send in a test to NYU? What are your thoughts there? Yeah. Let's see what else we got. Definitely not test optional. 38%. What do we think? Anyone else have some idea? This is tricky. Everyone's hesitating. Yeah. I can tell you, okay, I'm going to re-ask the question. From iLEAD, based on our philosophy, based on the things that we've put on our school profile, which I showed you earlier, do you think that an iLEAD student would absolutely need to send in a test to NYU? And I actually have the results of admissions, so I can tell you. But take a guess in that chat box first. We have one person who thinks probably not. Anyone else? This is 38%. Yeah, our kids have done great at NYU without test scores. There's been no problem with NYU. At 38%, I would call truly test optional. At 38%, I would make that a true test optional, regardless of whether you were at iLEAD or not. NYU is looking at other things. Harvey Mudd. Harvey Mudd is a STEM college where most people that turn in tests are turning in pretty perfect tests. 55, 65, 75, 76% send in a test score. Should you send in a test score to Harvey Mudd? Yeah, I would not consider this test optional. There are times when they would take a very outstanding student, but you really want to send in a test score, a good test score, unless you are just not a good tester, but study for that test and send it in. Here's an interesting one. USC, 42%. What are your thoughts? For USC, 42%. Anyone want to take a guess? We got to vote for test optional. Anyone else in the chat box? I'm going to phrase it also. Is it a test optional school for iLEAD? Because I actually know the answer to this question because I've been watching this for years. What do you think it is? If you are our student, because this is who this presentation is for, would you send a test score into USC? Interesting. 42%, less than half. So the chat box, we got kind of that it's really confusing at 42%, but I can tell you this year our didn't turn in tests. Last year, most students that went in there didn't turn in tests. They have been I have not seen a problem at all with USC with students going test optional, not at all. And it's been very interesting. I think one of the things about USC is with California students, they know of our UC and CSU policy and that a lot of students aren't taking tests. 42% is less than half of students that matriculated in that are attending now, less than half gave a test score. I would call that a true test optional, even without iLEAD. I would call that a true test optional. I would call NYU a true test optional. So let's actually take a look a little bit more closely. I think some of you may remember that we had case studies earlier with red, yellow, and green. We named our students after colors to kind of take away knowledge of them. So now, would you submit your test scores to USC? We saw those results, but one of the other things we can do is we can go into the common data set specifically, and we can see what people have turned in. So we can take a look at red. Remember, we got three students we looked at. So red has an English SAT of 670 and math of 660. So when you look now at the difference, let me move my chat box so I can see things better. When you look at the composite scores and you look at the individual scores, should red turn in a test score to USC? Her English is 670 and her math is 660. And we can see the lowest 25% of students had a 740 or below in math and a 700 or below in English. The 50th percentile was about here. So the vote in the chat box is test optional for red. And I agree. I agree. So red should not provide her scores. It would reduce her competitiveness. If she was even in the 25th percentile with iLEAD as her school, I would say that's okay for red, but I would stick test optional for red. We're going to look at yellow. I think yellow was actually when we did our whatchamacallit, when you did our presentation, I think that was more of our blue guy. But yellow, it has an ACT score. The composite score is a 34, and specifically looking at math and English, 35 and 32. So this is an interesting one. What are your thoughts about yellow? Looking at the ACT differences. What are your thoughts? This is tricky. Should he turn it in? And this is tricky on purpose because, yeah, it's debatable. That math is excellent. That's almost perfect. Um, and it's above the 75th percentile, but the English is below the 25th percentile. So one of the questions I would ask our yellow student is what the major is. Now, if this student is interested in STEM, that 35 in math is going to make a difference. If the student is interested in humanities, that English score may be harmful. It may be, yes. So the question in the chat box was, would it make a difference if yellow is STEM? Yes. Yes, it would. And I think that this takes more of a discussion. And so this would be one where I say, come visit me. Let's chat about what makes the most sense for you. I mean, that composite is still between the 50th and 75th percentile. English is a little iffy, and this is going to be on a case-by-case basis. And I think the major is going to matter in this case. So it's not all clear cut. Okay. So now we need our crystal ball because we don't know what's going on in the future, and every year it looks very different. What we know right now is that the UCs and CSUs remain test-free right now by court order. I don't know if there was ever a limit on that court order, but the UCs and CSUs went test optional or test-free because of a court order specifically that had to do with students with disabilities. A lot of people don't realize why it happened. It was because of access. And the judge basically said that students do not have equal access to testing when they have disabilities. And that is what caused the UCs to go test optional, and the CSUs followed them. Um, Other things that we know now, the SAT just a few years ago was paper pencil. It is now digital. It is adaptive. So we know that going forward. The ACT though is kind of both, and I don't know. I don't know if one of the things they will do is keep paper and pencil simply because it makes them different from the SAT. Um, so we're waiting to see. And the other thing is use updated study guides because we don't know because things change because suddenly it went from paper to pencil to digital and suddenly they're upgrading the digital. So make sure that regardless of what's happening in the future, you always have the most updated study guides for the digital SAT and ACT. Don't be tempted to save money and get an old version because when they change the test, and anytime they change the test, they change what's on the test and they change the focus of the test. I don't know why they just can't leave it alone, but okay. Um, you could see that for free resources, I have the actual College Board and the ACT, get them where they're written. uh, if you've already done these and you want more practice, by all means, head off to get other practice types of things. But for those free resources, always start with the true test and the tests that are released from the organizations themselves. So, what do you need to register? Just going to walk you through this because you're not registering through us with the ACT or the SAT. You need computer with internet. You're going to need to pull out a credit card. You're going to need our details. You're going to need a photo because they want a photo ID. And so the PSAT, let's jump into the PSAT. It is the preliminary. Some people call it the practice. It is an earlier version of the SAT. It is digital. It is adaptive. And what adaptive means is you're taking the first module, whether that be math or whether that be English and writing, and they change the second module depending on how you do in the first time. So if you did extremely well in that first module, you're suddenly going to find yourself doing something much harder. And if you did normal, average, or kind of below, you might find yourself doing something that's kind of evenly where you are or a little bit easier. It is meant to offer you the opportunity to prepare for the full test. And it can qualify in 11th grade, not 10th grade, in 11th grade for national merit, and in 10th and 11th grade, national recognition programs like rural programs. It used to be they had racial programs like Hispanic Scholar and things like that, but now they've changed that kind of with the changing winds, and they try to do first generation recognition and things like that. We're going to offer it. We offer it every October for 10th and 11th graders at iLEAD. So it is with us. It's a very inexpensive test. We do it in Orange County at our learning studio. Sometimes when a student is up in Santa Clarita or that area, sometimes they test at our sister school. We have a brick and mortar up there, and they've been very kind and allowed our students in. National Merit Program, top 1% of PSAT scores by state. So if you take the PSAT and you are a resident of New Mexico, where I'm from, it's a much lower PSAT score to become a National Merit Scholar because it's based on the top percent. If you are taking it here in California, we have pretty high scores, so it takes a lot to get a PSAT score that is in the top 1%. Our cutoff is just very high. Some colleges will offer a small scholarship. Very rarely do you get that big National Merit Scholarship. Employers, especially big employers like FedEx or UPS or other places like that, may have their own National Merit Scholarships for the children of their employees. Some colleges will offer generous scholarships, and you have to look for those individual scholarships, and a very few will offer significant. These are the four that are kind of the most well now known. Sometimes it's automatic, sometimes it's competitive. Alabama is famous for their national merit automatic scholarships that are basically a full ride plus supplemental. They do that to steal people away from very, very selective colleges. They go to Alabama, join the honors program, and get a full ride. 5 years of tuition. University of Idaho, tuition, room and board. Benedictine College, we have a student there right now, full tuition. And then USC has a right now, we never know what's happening with USC, but right now there is kind of a discount if you're a National Merit Scholarship winner. And there are others. They change. Okay, let's do a quick run through advanced placement. Advanced placement is an exam that comes after a course, a year-long course, with a few exceptions, a year-long course that is college level. We give exams. I'm proud to say that because most independent charter schools do not have a brick and mortar location to provide the exams. We do. We give any exam that any iLEAD student would like to take. So if you want to take anything, whether you take the course or not, we will give you that exam. We will provide it for you. So this is just an example of the variety of courses, everything from history and social sciences to art and music. We have math, computer science. You can see like there's 10 different history, social science classes. There's a lot of different world languages. They're increasing the math. They added pre-calc. And every year they seem to add more. Now they are adding AP Business with Personal Finance and AP of Cybersecurity, brand new. I think they start next year. I think they're piloting right now. So that's something to keep an eye on. It's a year-long course taught at a college level, but here at a high school. So the AP exam follows the course in May. The test can be taken without a course. The course can be taken without a test. So you can do one or the other. We have students take it without a test all the time. We have students that take the test without a course all the time. We're happy to offer you that test. Colleges may offer credit for a passing exam. That's a 3, 4, or 5 score. It is up to the college whether they offer credit. UCs, I think it's written into the legislative type of stuff that a 3 or above gets you credit for a passing exam. The more selected the college, the less likely they are to give you credit without an extremely high score. You may also request disability accommodations, just like with the SAT and ACT, that has to come through us. We have to make that request for you. And it's not automatic if you have an IEP or 504 plan. So just be aware of that. You can take the tests through us. You can take them through a local high school. Some high schools are friendly and will allow you in. Most high schools are not. That's one of the reasons we want to offer these tests is because sometimes they're pretty hard to find. And most time they will also increase the cost for you. An AP course must be approved by the College Board. They are specific courses. Beware of vendors offering AP prep, AP courses, Acellus saying it's an AP course. It has to be approved through the College Board. And if you find a course that we give you a list. We will tell you here a list of AP courses. We've got these great vendors. We've got Blue Tent and UC Scout and all these different places where you can take it. But if you have a vendor suddenly saying, oh, mine is AP, come and talk to us. We need to verify it. And there is a place on the College Board website where we look that up to make sure that it has been approved. Otherwise, you don't get AP extra honors points for it. And we don't put AP on the transcript. We have a ton of vendors and we always look for more so that we can try to give as many options as possible. Okay. So we got some more sessions coming up. We've got a college fit session, how to build a balanced list. We have transfer programs. So I've got a few more of these sessions coming up. Come and join me. They're fun. They're exciting. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say goodbye to my friends at home and hope you come in and join us next time. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to shut off the recording and we're going to do a really fast Q&A.